Hello, my wonderful third graders. I hope you're having a fantastic day. We are still in our Native American unit, Regions and Cultures, and today's lesson is called Native Americans of the Great Mississippi River Area. Do you know where the Mississippi River is? Some vocabulary you'll hear throughout the read aloud. Ceremonial is an adjective that describes something, means refers to a set of formal acts, often fixed and traditional, that are performed on important religious or social occasions. Graduation from one grade to another is sometimes celebrated by a ceremonial act, such as walking down an aisle in a robe and receiving a diploma. City-state is a noun, it's a thing, an independent city and the surrounding community it controlled. Athens was one of the most powerful city-states in ancient Greece. Conical is an adjective, it means having the shape of a cone. Cremated means reduced to ashes by fire, burned. An effigy is an image or representation often sculpted into a monument. The effigy on the monument was beautifully sculpted into an eagle. Evident is an adjective. It describes something, means clear to see or understand. Plain. The artist's talent was evident from the beautiful sculptures she created. Ritual, a procedure related to religion, custom, or culture. Vivian's bedtime ritual of putting on pajamas, brushing her teeth, and reading a story with her younger brother was the same every school night. So it's when you do something over and over, it's a ritual. Teeming is a verb, which means it's a doing word. To be filled to overflowing. The entrance to the football stadium was teeming with people pre-COVID. What have we already learned? How did farming change the lives of the early people? Once people began to farm, it allowed them to stay in one place if they chose to. Farming increased the food supply, and as a result, the population increased. With settlement came the need for additional rules to help large numbers of people live together. Why do you think the population increased once people began to farm? People were less susceptible to hunger and starvation. With more food, it was possible to feed a greater number of people. Also, corn could be stored for 2 to 3 years, and the surplus provided backup food in less productive years. So if they had a year when they didn't have a very good crop, they had some corn stored up. So eat some popcorn. How did people begin to use plants? They used them to make things such as clothes, homes, and medicines. What else did people raise for food? Animals such as turkeys. What are some of the regions where people began to settle and build different types of homes? We have Northwest, Canada, Northeast, Southwest, Central Plains, Southeast. Who can recall what cultural identity means? Cultural identity is a sense of culture that a particular group has of itself, and it includes a lot of different things. Where are we going to study today? A long time ago, some native people began to settle in towns in a region near the Mississippi River. So let's look at this poster of the United States that we have here. That we have here. And this is this river, Black River that you see running north to south, that goes through the middle of the United States of America that we have now, is called the Mississippi River. Okay, and the people settled there. Why do you think people would want to settle near a river? Well, it would give them water to drink and cook with, wash things with. They could also use it for transportation using canoes. They could irrigate their crops and be able to plant their crops in rich river soil. So irrigate means that they dig little ditches so that the water runs from the river into the crops to water them. So you don't have to rely only on rain. These native people began to build many mounds in this region. Do you know what a mound is? Look at this picture right here. A mound is a pile of earth that forms a hill. It can be small, such as a baseball mound, or very, very large. Because these people built so many mounds, they became known as mound builders. Many of these mounds are still in existence today. They might just look like hills. More than 3,000 years ago, in the river valleys north, south, east, and west of the Mississippi River, several groups of early Americans began to spread out and inhabit this large region rich in fertile soil. Because of the richness of the soil in the Mississippi River Valley, there was an abundance of plants that could be harvested for food. There was also a wide variety of fruits and berries that could be gathered. In addition, there were long, winding freshwater rivers that were teeming with fish. In the beginning, the groups of people who lived in this region survived by hunting, fishing, and gathering. Then, while continuing to hunt, many of them also began to farm. As you heard earlier, farming provided groups of people with a more reliable food supply. In particular, they began to grow sunflowers and squash. Later, they grew corn and beans. Because these early peoples began to farm the land, it became necessary for them to stay close to their crops. As a result, they began to construct permanent homes and settlements. As you heard earlier, once specific groups of people began to settle in certain regions, they began to develop their own unique cultures. These Native Americans built homes, developed languages, and learned new crafts and skills. Each group did these things in their own way, and their cultures grew out of the areas in which they lived. They also worshipped many nature gods and animal spirits, and they also created art, ornaments, and jewelry. But that is not all they created. Just as the ancient Egyptians, Maya, Aztec, and Inca built giant sculptures that rose up towards the heavens, so too did these early native peoples of eastern North America. They built amazing mounds. Do you remember what are people who believe in many gods called? Right? Polytheistic. Remember, if you believe in one god, you're called monotheistic. Mono means one. What other groups that you have learned about were polytheistic? You talked about the Romans and the Vikings. What is a mound? It's just a big pile of dirt that looks like a hill. Some of the mounds were small with rounded tops. Others were flat-topped mounds. Others rose up into the sky like pyramids. Some were burial mounds, whereas others were strictly for ceremonial purposes. There were mounds shaped like animals, too. Often the chief of the settlement, as the most important leader, had his home built on top of a mound. Today, archaeologists call this early native culture the Mississippian culture. The Mississippians were one of the three distinct groups known as mound builders. These three groups, called the Adena, Hopewell, and the Mississippians, lived at different times in and around this region of North America. So they weren't around each other, right? So time went by, and then another group became, then more time went by, and another group became. Why do you think archaeologists gave them the name Mississippian? Well, they lived near the Mississippi River. The Adena were one of the early groups of people to build mounds. They built mounds that ranged in size from less than 20 feet to more than 300 feet in diameter. These mounds functioned as earthen burial chambers and religious ceremonial sites. The Adena inhabited a large area near the Ohio River in what are now the states of Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia, Kentucky, and parts of Pennsylvania and New York. So this group of mound builders had moved into some areas that were connected to the Mississippi River by the Ohio River and some other areas that were quite a distance away from both rivers. The Adena lived in villages in circular homes with conical roofs. These Native American homes were made from poles, tree branches, mud, and bark. The Adena hunted and gathered, and they also worked together to grow sunflower, squash, and tobacco. Interestingly, this first group of mound builders did not grow corn. However, it is believed that they smoked tobacco, probably as a ritual during important religious ceremonies and celebrations. They are known to have traded these products with other native groups. When you consider how difficult it must have been to build the mounds, it seems likely that developing a system and plan were strong aspects of the cultural identity of the Adena. Building a mound required a lot of people working together. They had to move tons of earth from one place to another with nothing more than baskets to hold it. Why did these Native Americans build the mounds? Well, just as with many ancient cultures, the reason was connected to the Adena's religious beliefs. Proper burial and honoring their ancestors was very important to them. Most people were cremated when they died and placed in long tombs, which in turn were placed inside a mound. However, important members and leaders of the group were not cremated. Their bodies were placed inside the mounds with some of their personal belongings, such as beads, pipes, and flints. With each burial, more and more earth was placed upon the mound. Archaeologists believe that the mounds began as smaller constructions and over many years became larger as more bodies and therefore more earth was added to them. Flints are hard stones used as tools, often to spark a fire. Why do you think that personal objects were placed inside the mound along with the bodies? The people actually believed that the dead needed these items in the afterlife to honor the dead, to decorate their tombs or places of rest. This 60,000-ton mound would have weighed about the same as 152 Empire State Buildings. Can you think of other ancient structures that also took a long time to construct? The pyramids of the ancient Egyptians, Maya, Aztec, and Inca. The largest and most impressive Adena burial mound, still evident in North America, is in West Virginia and is known as Grave Creek Mound. This is a modern name for an ancient site. More than 60,000 tons of soil was moved in the construction of this mound, and is thought to have taken more than 100 years to complete. It's a long time. But perhaps the most interesting Adena construction is the curved serpent mound in Ohio, which was not a burial mound, but an effigy mound. In this case, this effigy is a mound shaped into a 1,370-foot snake. The Adena believed in the power of animal spirits, and this one is thought to have been a very important religious site. It is the largest effigy earthwork in the world. Gradually, however, the Adena culture merged with other cultures to become the next group of native mound builders called the Hopewell. The Hopewell built well-constructed villages along riverbanks. They produced food by hunting, by gathering nuts, seeds, fruits, and roots, by farming, and by fishing. They used animal hides for clothing, mats, and homes. They made stone pipes, used copper, and like the Adena, traded with other native peoples. Today, scientists believe that Hopewell sites show evidence of trade connections from the Rocky Mountains to Lake Superior to North Carolina, practically across the entire continent. These sites also reveal what extraordinary artists the Hopewell were. Archaeologists know this from artifacts that have survived, including decorative pottery in the shape of animals and human beings. How do you think these native people moved from place to place? They had to walk, or they used canoes that they dug out. Hopewell mounds were even bigger than Adena mounds. It's possible that these mounds were used not only for burial purposes, but also as ceremonial temples, and perhaps even for defense purposes, in addition to providing high ground in time of flooding. Within Hopewell settlements, tribal and religious leaders would have had a significant amount of power. The Hopewell had rules, just as all societies do, designed to help large groups of people who live in one place. Chiefs and religious leaders were often responsible for enforcing these rules. Why do you think it is important to have rules for large groups of people living in one place? Well, rules help eliminate confusion by letting people know what is expected of them. This may help to protect against conflict. So if everybody knows what they're supposed to do, people can't argue about it, right? You'd be like, no, that's the rule of the tribe, buddy. You gotta do it. The final prehistoric cultural group of North American mound builders was the Mississippian culture. This was perhaps the most developed mound culture of all. They were a people who relied upon corn as their most important food crop. They lived in large towns, sometimes referred to as city-states. They were populated by hundreds, if not thousands, of people. The largest Mississippian town was Hopewell in Missouri. Within each Mississippian town, there were several mounds, but the most important mound was a flat-top mound upon which sat a religious temple or a ruler's house. The flat-top mound was usually constructed in the central plaza. Mississippian mounds were several stories high and were symbols of the people's religious belief. The Mississippians worshipped the sun and their ancestors. They were expert craftspeople, artists, and builders. The people were governed by powerful leaders and priests, and their religious beliefs touched every aspect of their lives. When Europeans came to North America, they encountered the Mississippian people. The largest mound in this town is one of the mounds still in existence today and is known as Monk's Mound. It covers an area of 16 acres. Oh wow, that's huge. It is larger at its base than the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Over a long period of time, thousands of mounds were constructed by these three distinct groups of people, the Adena, Hopewell, and Mississippians. This Mississippian mound is in Georgia. None of the names mentioned here are native names. We do not know what these people called their mounds or even what they called themselves. Ironically, it is the mounds that provide us with a window to the past. After thousands of years, the mounds and the artifacts that have been discovered in and around them speak to us of a time long ago before Europeans came to this continent. They speak of a time when native people worshipped many groups of nature gods and lived out their lives freely on this land. What do you think the saying window to the past means? As you have heard about the artifacts of the ancient Romans, the discovery of Native American artifacts by an archaeologist provides us with a window to see into the past and learn more about the ways various peoples lived. How many groups of mound builders did you learn about, and what were their names? There were three groups of mound builders, the Adena, the Hopewell, and the Mississippians. Did these three groups live and build mounds at the same time or at different times? Different times. Where did the mound builders live? Near the Mississippi River and surrounding areas. States like Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia, Kentucky, Missouri, and parts of Pennsylvania and New York. Why did they choose to settle near a river? To have access to water for drinking, irrigating crops, growing crops in rich river soil, and traveling. If you visited these areas today, what could you see very clearly that shows that the mound builders lived in this region? Many mounds, right? You can still see the mounds that they built. Why did the mound builders build mounds? For burial sites of their ancestors, for ceremonial and religious reasons, and possibly as defense structures. What was the Mississippians' most important crop? Corn. You have heard that as native people settled into regions, it was necessary for the chiefs and religious leaders to create and enforce new rules. Are rules necessary today? Why? Why, no, they're necessary in my classroom. Yes, rules are just as important today as they were long ago. Today, more and more people live together in towns and cities. Rules are needed to organize how each community, city, and even country functions. There would be chaos without rules. People would go crazy and do whatever they want, and it would be not good. You heard that the Mississippians worshiped the sun. Why do you think so many ancient cultures worshiped the sun? Why is the sun important? They understood the connection between the sun and the rejuvenation of Earth each year, how it made things grow. They understood that people, plants, and animals need sun to live and grow. Our word for today is ceremonial. In the read aloud you heard, some mounds were burial mounds, whereas others were strictly for ceremonial purposes. Say the word ceremonial. Ceremonial refers to a set of formal acts, often fixed and traditional, that are performed on important religious or social occasions. As part of the ceremonial procession, the queen was required to wear a crown and a robe. Have you ever taken part or attended something that could be considered ceremonial? Where were you? Have you ever been to like a graduation or maybe a church service where they do something that's ceremonial that they do over and over, like the taking of communion? Those are all ceremonial. So, building a mound required a lot of energy and the effort of many people working together. What do you think it would have been like to have been one of the workers building a mound? What steps would you use to build a mound? Write this as if you were a mound builder. So you're going to write it from the point of view of an ancient mound builder. Tell me what you would do as a mound builder. Use as many of the words from the read aloud that you can in your answer. Good job, third graders. Have a good rest of your day.